greatest ever goes in search of the ultimate two-wheeled ride.
A motorcycle is a machine for making you feel good.
They're the most basic form of transport, but they just happen to be the best fun you can have on the road.
To earn the right to be the greatest ever motorcycle, the bikes will be pushed to the limit. We'll ride them hands-free. We're gonna race a jet fighter. And we're gonna try and destroy them.
A motorcycle is an extension of one's ego. A motorcycle is an extension of one's penis. A motorcycle is an extension of one's spirit to literally fly.
After you've ridden a 500 Grand Prix bike or MotoGP bike for that perfect lap, there's nothing else that can that I have ever witnessed that comes close to that.
To find the greatest ever motorcycle, we've got the greatest panel of bike experts, like Jay Leno, who'll show us around his personal museum.
Why does anybody like bikes? You're either attracted to it or you're not. It's a bit like all of a sudden you're attracted to girls. Well, what is it about the girl? Well, there's certain parts of it you find intriguing.
Some people call it an obsession, some people call it an addiction. Some people just call it the greatest thing in the world.
Now sit back and hold on, as you're about to discover the ultimate ride. Starting our countdown is a bike that symbolizes rebellion. It's well armed. It's the Harley-Davidson Knucklehead.
Knucklehead, that sounds like a lot of work.
The Knucklehead has probably the highest sex appeal factor on the Richter scale.
Well, there's no doubt, if that bike hadn't existed, Harley wouldn't exist today.
Launched in 1936, it wasn't until after victory in the Second World War when servicemen returned from the battlefield and were looking for some wild peacetime excitement that this Harley legend was born.
It's like being able to buy a hot rod. You know, it was the fastest bike of its time in America.
The Knucklehead's twin V-aligned cylinders doubled the engine's brake horsepower. While previous Harleys could do 65 miles an hour, the Knucklehead's 1000cc V-twin could do 100. Even so, it wasn't fast enough.
Everyone wants their bike to be kind of quicker and better than the next guy's, so people really started heavily modifying their machines, and to start off with, it was all about stripping them down to their essence.
They chopped bits off to make the bikes lighter and faster, and rechristened them choppers.
It was an expression of bucking the rules, and from that point on, people who rode motorcycles were the bad people.
Being a bad boy was really liberating. It created an image that continues to this day.
So this is my 1945 Knucklehead chopper. The engine is what makes the Knucklehead a Knucklehead. The heads here, this is why they call it a Knucklehead. Supposedly it looks like these knuckles on a fist, right here, just like that. This knuckle, of course, isn't stock, it's chopped, or what we say, chopper. It's, you take off all the unnecessary equipment and you customize it so that it's your own. We have a chrome Springer front end. Stock, of course, was black. This is a 21-inch front wheel with a modern disc brake. Small headlight here. These what they call dog bones to bring the handlebars up into baby apes. I think it makes the riding configuration more comfortable where you're up here. It vibrates, it roars, it hugs the road. It's part of you and it's part of history.
The idea was you sort of got on the road. There were big wide seats, as you can see, comfortable, softly sprung. Because in America, especially in the Midwest, it was 200 miles dead straight.
It's kind of agricultural, but you do it with a big grin on your face. You know, it's a fantastic thing.
60 years on, and the Knucklehead's legacy is still alive in all modern Harley V-twin engines. But a whole new type of rider has taken to the road.
Why do I ride a Harley? You know, I like Harleys and I like my Harley friends, but I love the person that I turn into. The person I turn into is one that's just completely saturated with all my senses. Sight, I see the unblocked, unobstructed views of this God-given country. Sound, of course, I hear that beautiful American legendary rolling thunder. But the most important is the taste. And you go, what do you taste when you ride a Harley? I taste the Spirit of God. Every time I'm on that motorcycle, I thank Him for the freedom and the ability to cruise on my V-twin.
When you look at a modern Harley now, and you look at a knucklehead next to it, you can see the two are kind of absolutely genetically related. There's a really close DNA between them.
All Harleys share a unique sound, but even this fantastic rumble originates from the Knucklehead's V-twin.
They make this roar, kind of like a thunder. It's in your ears, it's in your head, it's in your blood. And it's a roar, kind of like you're on a wild beast. And as you ride, it talks to you. It goes, I'm feeling good, 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 potato, 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 potato. And the more you crank the gas, the faster it gets. The more sound comes out of it, louder and louder.
But just how unique is this rumble? Well, the greatest ever is gonna find out.
We're going to test to see if Harley-Davidson really does have that unique rolling thunder.
One of these bikes is a Harley, but can Angie recognize it from its sound?
Here we go.
First up, a Honda Shadow 750cc.
I'm positive that is not a Harley.
Next, a whopping 1100cc cruiser.
That's not a Harley.
And last of all, it's our Harley-Davidson.
That's my Harley. Did I get it right? Yeah! Woo!
The Knucklehead, I love it because it was the great-great-great-great-great-grandfather of what you see on the roads now. It's an eye-catcher. I'd say it's a classic-looking, beautiful Harley. It's a rolling art.
Rolling art it may be, but it's the bad boy image that sells Harley-Davidson motorcycles today.
So you get the dentists, you get the lawyers who are in their office from Monday to Friday. Saturday, they iron on the tattoos, they put on the false beards, and they go chugging around in a Harley-Davidson.
The Knucklehead's pure motorcycling emotion. It's just about riding, whereas the modern one's about being seen on it somehow. It doesn't have the purity of a Knucklehead.
The Knucklehead is certainly a classic, but for turning this symbol of freedom into an executive toy, this Harley gets 10th place. Coming up, 9 more fantastic bikes, including the most audacious race bike ever built.
It seems like a crazy attempt to reach for the stars.
And the bike that put Italy back on the road.
It's the sound of Italy. It's the sound of Rome and Milan.
As we search for the greatest ever motorcycle. In our search to find the greatest ever motorcycle, the Harley-Davidson Knucklehead claimed the number 10 slot. And at number 9 is the most daring motorcycle ever built. It's the 1955 Moto Guzzi V8 race bike.
Moto Guzzi.
The Guzzi is just an incredible machine. You know, it's multi-cylinder technology at a time when no one else was doing it.
It seems like a crazy attempt to reach for the stars.
It's just the perfect combination of genius and madness.
So why is this bike so great? Well, it all comes down to the engine.
The V8 was genius, but kind of genius and insanity mixed up in one. It was a huge leap forward. It was like, why carry on doing what we're doing now, producing single-cylinder machines? Let's just leap forward in one fell swoop, 20 years, and let's build a V8.
In an engine, the more cylinders you have, the more power you get. But it also increases the size. And a V8 is huge, which is why it was only ever put on cars.
I like the most complicated possible way to do the simplest task. That always seems to intrigue me. And the Moto Guzzi V8 is the most complicated way to do the simplest task.
To build a V8 small enough to fit on a bike, Moto Guzzi had to quarter the size of all the components. The whole thing weighed just 45 kilograms.
The genius of this design is not so much in daring to make an 8-cylinder engine, but in packaging it so tightly that it became usable as a motorcycle engine.
The V8 engine was a bit of a jewel. Everything was so small in it compared to other engines of the time. It was a real work of art.
And when you look at one of those Guzzi V8s all apart, it's like taking a watch apart, little tiny pieces.
Racing is always about going fast, but the 50s were pretty special from that point of view. The Guzzi V8 did almost 190 miles an hour, and it was another 30 years before Grand Prix bikes had got back up to that speed.
But technical problems such as engine seizures plagued the gutsy V8, costs spiraled, and sadly it was scrapped in 1958, just 3 years after its conception.
It was ahead of its time. If metal technology had been greater at that time, the V8 probably would have been a world championship winning motorcycle, but it was too much technology for the time, I think.
50 years later, you think they were making a V8 Grand Prix bike back then. It's just fantastic.
Of course, it could be said that genius which succeeds is genius, and genius which fails is madness. But that can only be said in retrospect.
Although the gutsy V8 is the most audacious statement in racing, ultimately it was a failure, so it gets 9th place. Our next bike put Italy back on wheels and is today the ultimate fashion accessory. In 8th place, it's the Vespa.
And the Vespa is just a buzzy little thing. It's a sort of a bike, isn't it?
And the Vespa is one of those elements of chemistry where engineering and art kind of flow together in just the right combination.
It's the sound of Italy. It's the sound of Rome and Milan.
When you ride a Vespa, you're not just riding a cheap, efficient mode of transport. You're riding something which has so much style and history.
Even its name is stylish. Vespa is the Italian for wasp and was given to the bike because it looked just like one.
The Italians are very good at design, and then their designs are rooted, I think, in sensuality. It's all rounded, the rounded edges. It's not a threatening machine. It's a kind of a warm and cozy, fuzzy machine.
The entire thinking behind the Vespa wasn't motorcycle thinking, which is why it's such a success, because it didn't sell to motorcyclists. It sold to people that had to ride a two-wheeler, not wanted to ride a two-wheeler.
Italy had been flattened during the Second World War, and so Piaggio, an aircraft manufacturer, came up with the Vespa as an innovative answer to the need for basic transport.
The Vespa was a brilliant improvisation using things which Piaggio already had or could easily produce. For example, the wheels of the original prototype were aircraft tail wheels. The simple two-stroke engine was a starting unit for large aircraft engines. And the structure, pressed sheet metal.
The Vespa is fascinating because it wasn't designed to be a motorcycle as such. It was designed by an aeronautics engineer who actually hated motorcycles. So all the negative aspects of motorcycles as he perceived them were ironed out of the Vespa. So there was no oily chains, there was no exposed engines. You didn't have to dress up in motorcycle clothing, you could ride it totally normally.
It was just really easy to ride. Women could ride it. People rode it to work. It was just a doddle. Decent suspension, it could be ridden over bad roads. Really nice little thing.
But it wasn't its magnificent robustness and handling that made it popular. It was because it was cool.
Celebrities wanted to be photographed on them. Pop stars wanted to be photographed on them. Piaggio understood about marketing. He just made it the symbol of the scooter. You didn't say a scooter, you said a Vespa.
It's meant so much to so many people. After the Second World War, it got Italy back on the road. Then it became the choice of the mods in Britain, became a huge cult machine. And now it's back to being what it first was. It's a utilitarian vehicle.
I love my Vespa because she gets me around everywhere in London. I've always wanted a Vespa. I always used to see them parked around in scooter bays and things, and I used to always think, God, look how beautiful they look. They're just so streamlined. They've got a beautiful shape. They're just so cute. Look at the back of a Vespa, and it's got a really cute butt. I don't know. I just love it.
Scooters are still around. Scooters are still the perfect way of getting around town, and the Vespa was the first. Just a genius invention.
The Vespa is undoubtedly the king of the city runarounds, but with wheels no bigger than dinner plates, this bike is out of its league on the highway, and so for that, it's placed 8th. But number 7 is a machine which outperformed everything, one of the most desirable and exclusive motorcycles of all time. It's the Brough Superior.
The Brough Superior stood for speed and luxury in an age when it was pretty difficult to get either out of a motorcycle.
In its time, it could achieve levels of performance that were denied to any other machine.
It's 1924, and it's a bike that's guaranteed to do 100 miles an hour. I mean, that's just madness, isn't it?
This is my 1934 SS100 Brough Superior. It's the fastest road bike the company ever produced.
In an age when the average car could only do 42 miles an hour, the SS100's JAP engine could get up to 110. It was the ultimate in performance and luxury.
The Brough Superior is known as the Rolls-Royce of motorcycles, following a road test in, I think, 1923, when the tester likened it to a Rolls-Royce. George Brough used this in his advertising.
Rolls-Royce got a bit miffed at this, so they said, we're coming out to the factory to see. So George had everybody put on white coats and gloves and, just go around. And so when Rolls-Royce came, they were so impressed that, these guys were dressed as gentlemen and, such care. And
Rolls-Royce were so bowled over by what they saw that from then on, the Brough Superior had their seal of approval.
George Brough, that made it, was a bit of a showman. He would do anything for publicity, really.
I think George was a bit like P.T. Barnum was in America. Like you say, you break a record, then you make sure everybody knows that you've broken that record. And even people not interested will now know. But that's what makes them fun. There's such a mystique about them. There's all these sort of sexy stories. And of course, Lawrence of Arabia had 7 of them. And he would write letters to the factory, and George would publish those letters. And he would talk about the speed, and he raced the biplane. And, and if you're a schoolboy at the time, well, this was just, legend.
For anyone wanting the thrill of speed, the SS100 couldn't be beaten. But traveling at 100 miles an hour was a precarious feat.
Problem of early motorcycles in the 1920s was called speedman's wobble. A speedman was a motorcyclist who liked to go fast.
The wobble was caused by the front wheel becoming unstable, but Brough had an ingenious answer for this.
The machine has castle forks, which are of the leading link design, which means that the wheel spindle is carried ahead of the main fork member. This means that it's a very stable design. If you hit a bump, then you're less likely to get into a speed wobble.
The Brough, because of its castle fork and its stout chassis construction, was stiff enough to reach high speeds without developing speedman's wobble.
In 1925, George Brough demonstrated the stability of his new SS100 model by having his road tester ride the machine at about 90 miles an hour and then remove his hands from the handlebars.
This feat hasn't been repeated in 80 years, so the greatest ever is going to attempt to do it again and ride a Brough Superior hands-free at 90 miles an hour.
This is the big one. There we are, accelerating now. Up to 75, up to 80, into top. We're reaching 90 miles an hour. We're at 90 miles an hour now, and the hands are off. Bit of a crosswind, but it's pretty stable. 95 we're doing now, hands off, absolutely no problem whatsoever. George Brough may have been a bit of a bullshitter, but he certainly wasn't bullshitting about the stability of the SS100. Absolutely no problems. What a machine.
It was not hype, it was true. The motorcycle did stand up to all the advertising. It was an exceptional motorcycle that did exceptional things all well.
The Brough Superior was this astonishing quality product. It was really expensive, but it was beautifully made, and it was incredibly fast. You kind of got what you paid for with the Brough Superior.
In its day, the SS100 cost £170, when most people earn just £3 a week, and so was only ever ridden by an exclusive few. For that reason alone, it gets 7th place. And at number 6 is a truly unique race bike. It's fast, furious, and built by one man. It's John Britton's V1000.
John Britton was a man obsessed.
The Britain is just two fingers up to the whole motorcycle industry.
Everyone that's ever got their hands dirty working on a bike has dreamt of making one. They've dreamt about creating a motorbike, and John Britton actually did it.
In the early 1990s, John Britton, an engineering genius from New Zealand, stunned the world with a race bike that he built in his garage.
The Britton is a unique machine because it just shouldn't have ever happened, really. In the 1990s, it should not really have been possible for one man to take on whole factories and defeat them.
The V1000 won repeatedly through its racing career. It did this not with the fastest engine, but because it was the best designed bike on the track.
There's a lot of room left in motorcycle development. It's not even begun to stop. And I think that he was one of the guys that saw something different and was actually able to transfer that to a living beast.
Remarkably, Britton built the V1000 from scratch and constructed every piece of it himself.
John Britton looked at the whole bike from top to bottom. He didn't just take one element. He really looked at the whole thing and said, how can we do this differently? Is there a better way of doing it?
To make the bike faster, he had to make it lighter. But the problem is this can make the bike weaker. Britton had a simple solution.
He threw away everything that wasn't necessary. And if he could make one component do two jobs, he did. So the engine unit has got the back suspension bolted onto the back of it and the front suspension bolted onto the front of it. And effectively, the frame doesn't exist. There is no frame.
But Britton's most innovative idea was to use carbon fiber to build most of the bike's components, just as strong as conventional materials, but less than half the weight.
So you're always looking to make a motorcycle better. You're always trying to anticipate what it wants so you can go faster. So you're always looking for the last split of a second.
The V1000 weighed just 145 kilograms. That's 25% less than its nearest rival. But to make the bike even faster, Britton redesigned its suspension.
The dominant form of motorcycle suspension to this day is the telescopic fork. However, telescopic fork involves sliding friction. It's not a smooth motion, it's a jerky motion. John decided to substitute for the telescopic fork this girder-type fork, which uses rotary motion rather than sliding motion.
The circular motion of the girder fork is much smoother and meant the V1000 could corner faster. The results were startling.
Ferociously fast and extremely well handling. It just left everybody else in the dust.
The V1000 raced against the greatest bikes in the world and beat them. It's the most successful independent racing bike on the planet.
He made a bike that was clever, beautiful, and really fast.
It may not be the best motorcycle on the racetrack, but it's his interpretation of what the best motorcycle should be.
It kicked ass. It's the greatest motorcycle because it kicked the ass of the big guys.
It's such a romantic story. That's what I love about it. It's just this idea that one man can make a motorbike and it can win.
But the V1000 has a tragic end. John Britton passed away after a short illness just 3 years after building the bike, and the revolutionary technology died with him. It's our 6th greatest ever motorcycle. We're halfway through our countdown, and so far we've had bikes that epitomize luxury and speed. But still to come, the coolest bike on the planet.
It was kind of like bare naked sex in a rough and rumble American way.
And the motorcycle that takes riding to the max.
It's frightening to drive, but then again, it's sort of exhilarating. You just kind of go, oh, I'm still alive.
As we search for the greatest ever motorcycle. So far in our top 10 greatest ever motorcycles, we've had romance, sex, and speed. With another 5 bikes to go before we find out which is the ultimate ride, what could top that? Well, how about a bike that has all 3? A British motorcycle that became an icon on both sides of the Atlantic. It is the Triumph Bonneville.
Triumph was the quintessential British motorcycle. And in the 50s, the company was made the coolest thing on earth when Marlon Brando rode a Triumph in the Wild One. He didn't ride a Harley, he rode a Triumph.
For this British export, Brando was key to selling it successfully in the USA.
When Marlon Brando rode into the Wild One riding a Triumph, it set a new standard for being a bad boy.
They were the coolest bikes in America.
It was kind of like bare naked sex in a rough and rumble American way.
The Bonneville was the kind of bike that every young, thrusting male wanted because it was performance personified.
And it was performance that gave the bike its name.
You call a motorcycle the Bonneville, it's all about speed.
A modified and streamlined Triumph set a new land speed record of 214 miles per hour at Bonneville, Utah.
It was the fastest bike in the best range of bikes that were on the market.
It was light, it was powerful, it handled well. It was the ultimate go-fast motorcycle back in those days.
I remember when you went into the Triumph dealer, all Triumph Bonnevilles had that sticker on the gas tank that said, for the expert rider only. When, of course, when you're 14 and never even sat on a motorcycle, well, that's one you have to have because obviously you're an expert or will soon be.
The Bonneville 650cc twin-cylinder engine provides loads of power. But with two large pistons moving up and down at the same time, it has a major downside: vibration.
This is my 1970 Triumph Bonneville. I'm going to start it up so you can see the vibration. What you can see here is the front wheel is dancing. That's due to the vibration. Also, look at the instruments. They're all wiggling, and as is everything on the whole motorcycle is vibrating. And it gives you the feeling of power. You know that there's real horsepower there as you're accelerating, and the vibration, of course, continues as you accelerate.
They did vibrate, and women seem to enjoy them a bit more. So, oh, we have a Triumph. Yes, I'll ride on the back of that. Sure.
As much as power was at the heart of the Bonneville, it was its sheer beauty that sold it.
It was a motorcycle that created desire. You desired one.
It's sexy, it's cool, it's fast, it's just the perfect balance of what a motorbike should be.
This bike, as you see it, I think was about as perfect as it got. In styling, in looks, in paint. There's nothing on the bike that doesn't have to be there, with the exception of the, used to call this the castrator, this lovely luggage tray here. When you'd have the accident, a certain part of you would hook onto this, and then you're back to riding Vespas after that.
The Bonneville defined high performance on two wheels for 10 years, but without any investment. In 1969, Honda stole its crown, and Triumph was forced into bankruptcy, so it only gets 5th place. The bike at number 4 takes riding to the max. Probably the most controversial motorcycle on the list. It's the exceptional Y2K.
Well, this is really a stupid motorcycle.
The Y2K motorcycle raises the question, why?
The Y2K's got as much relevance to motorcycling as a fish.
To me, the Y2K isn't about motorcycling. It's an exercise in technological masturbation.
Steady, guys. This bike has a specification that makes grown men weep.
This is the Y2K Turbine Superbike. It's powered by a Rolls-Royce gas turbine engine, producing over 320 horsepower. This little engine is capable of over 400 foot-pounds of torque at 2,000 RPM. The bike weighs essentially 500 pounds, dry. It will hold 8 U.S. gallons of diesel, kerosene, Jet A. Quite literally anything that'll burn, this motorcycle will run on it.
Its incredible jet engine is taken straight out of a helicopter and means the Y2K can travel at 250 miles an hour.
It doesn't make any sense at all. And it's one of those things you can only run in America. In England, you'd be in prison. You'd be in prison within minutes of having this stupid thing on the road.
Jay's owned a bike almost 4 years now, and he's quite literally our test pilot.
When we talk about distinctive sounds that motorcycles make, you know, you can hear a Harley Davidson, you can tell a Ducati that's coming. But the Y2K makes a sound signature unlike anything else on wheels. You feel like there's an F-16 landing in your backyard, but it's Jay on his Y2K.
Well, it's a great fun to ride. It's a bit like flying a jet plane, but on land. I mean, you open the throttle and you hear, and then you feel this tremendous fire is a turbine, and it's like, it's frightening to drive, but then again, it's sort of exhilarating. You just kind of go, oh, I'm still alive.
Why would you put a jet helicopter engine in a motorcycle frame and try to pilot it down the street? And the answer is, because we can.
I mean, this was meant to lift a Bell Ranger helicopter with 6 guys in it and full of equipment. You know, what does that weigh? 5,000 pounds? This is 450 pounds, so power to weight ratio. Do the math!
At 250 miles an hour, the Y2K holds the Guinness World Record as the fastest production bike ever made. It's also the most expensive.
Well, the motorcycle's at $185,000 on for the faint of heart, but obviously you have to be able to stroke the check to have this kind of a sensation in your life. And like I said, if you could bottle and sell, it'd be the most addictive drug in the world. And this is the kind of drug I want to be addicted to.
I'll show you something cool on this. Look at the rear taillight.
But behind this gimmick lies a serious story built on experience.
And I was sitting at a traffic light one day, and there was a Nissan Infiniti, you know. And I could see the guy easing up to look at the bike, and I kept trying to go forward, and he kept easing up, and I realized I couldn't go anymore. I'd be in traffic. And you've got 1,200 degrees coming out of this exhaust. And I look back, and I see his front bumper start to go, because it's plastic. It just smells like this, you know. So I'm like, oh, gee, it's like, might pull away. I don't think he probably noticed till he got home.
It might do 250 miles an hour, but what's the point of doing 250 miles an hour if you can't really go around corners? It's not a complete motorcycle. It's a kind of a bit of a gimmick, I suppose.
Gimmick or not, the greatest ever is about to find out. We've set up an experiment to test the sheer power of the Y2K's acceleration at Acadiana Military Airport, Louisiana. The Y2K turbine superbike is about to go head-to-head with an L-39 jet fighter. From a standing start, the bike hopes to beat the low-flying jet over a mile-long course.
Certainly, I'm nervous. The rider is obviously the guy that's got this rocket between his legs. We've got a special stunt rider here, and James Kane has agreed to ride the bike. I'm confident that we've got the horsepower and the torque to get the job done.
As the plane makes its final descent, Ted gives the stunt rider some last-minute instructions.
Oh, we're going to beat the planes, no doubt. It's just how bad now. I told him to let it all hang out. Don't hold anything back.
The jet is flying at 170 miles an hour. The bike will go when the plane is just 50 meters behind it. It's a test of pure acceleration. It looks like it's a close finish, so Ted has to wait for the official result.
The back one.
All right! Thanks, guys.
The Y2K accelerated to an incredible 217 miles per hour in 14 seconds and beat the jet by just 2 bike lengths.
I think it's one of the greatest motorcycles because someone said, let's stick a jet motor and 2 wheels. I mean, that's pushing the envelope.
The Y2K doesn't do it for me at all. I think it's just a guy with a small dick trying to prove something.
Most of us didn't have the opportunity to become a jet pilot and fly F-14s and Top Gun. This is Top Gun.
It really does scare you half to death, but it's great fun.
I think they should get the points for just doing what no one else would have thought wise to do in the first place.
Top Gun or not, the experts' decisions are split, and for that, the Y2K is stuck at number 4. Our third greatest motorcycle is one of the most pivotal bikes ever made. It changed the way all bikes were designed. It's the Honda CB750.
This was the ultimate motorcycle of its time.
The The CB750 was the world's first ever superbike. It came out in 1969, just blew everything else away.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
1969 was the year of the first moon landing, and the Honda CB750 came out in the same year, which was fairly fitting, really, because it was light years ahead of the competition.
The competition were the British bikes, especially the Bonneville, but they now looked antiquated in comparison to the space-age CB750.
Beautiful view. Isn't that something?
When I was 21, I had walked into a local dealership. The dealer was kind enough to let me test ride a 750 Honda. I took it out through the streets of Hollywood, running along at about 100 miles an hour, not that I condone speeding, and came back to the dealer, and first thing I asked is, how do I buy one? Who do I have to kill to get this bike?
Here was a bike that could do 0 to 60 in 7.5 seconds and had such high-quality engineering it could run for over 100,000 miles trouble-free. It was the first time a bike had been so durable and reliable.
It was a production motorcycle that outperformed virtually everything that was before it, and it changed the way motorcycling in general is designed.
This state-of-the-art engineering included the first ever disc brakes on a production bike. These are extremely reliable and meant the CB750 could stop much faster than its British rivals. On top of this was the revolutionary inline 4-cylinder engine.
4 cylinders were like Ferraris. They were extremely expensive motorcycles, limited production. Parts were not available. Then suddenly Honda comes along with this. And a disc brake. I mean, disc brakes were for airplanes. Even most American cars did not have disc brakes at the time.
This is my 1970 750 Honda. I've had it for many, many years now. I'm going to start it up for you. I want you to take a listen to this. Close your eyes and pretend this is a Ferrari.
Even now, most high-capacity motorcycles you see on the street are inline 4s, just like the CB750. That's like 35 years on.
The inline 4, with its 2 pairs of counterbalance pistons, took the real glory. Developed in Grand Prix racing, this removed the vibration that had limited the engine capacities of all previous bikes. It meant steady power, even at high speed.
One of the tests that the dealers, salesmen tried to show was that they would balance a glass of water on the seat and rev the motor and show that it still stays there. It just so happens I have a glass of water right behind me. Let's try that test. Pretty amazing. Certainly couldn't do that on any bike made prior to '69 or any other model. I'm impressed. I didn't realize it was that smooth. I guess it does work.
The CB750 certainly made it that you didn't have to suffer to go fast. Until then, if you wanted to go fast, you had to put up with vibration, you had to put up with unreliability, you had to put up with oil leaks, you had to put up with bikes that perhaps didn't stop very well, fell apart around you. It just made it really easy.
Sadly, this outstanding performance and reliability does come with one major disadvantage.
This is going to sound odd, but riding the CB750 is actually a little boring because it's too smooth and it does everything a little too well.
I guess British and Italian bikes are about emotion and Harleys are about emotion, whereas the Honda wasn't. It was a much more clinical bike. It ticked all the boxes. It performed and it stopped and it went around corners and it looked good, but it's just a bit boring.
The CB750's groundbreaking performance and reliability ultimately made it a dull ride, and for that, it gets 3rd place. But at number 2 is a bike that will give you the ride of your life. From its extraordinary looks to its phenomenal performance, it is the Ducati 916.
The 916 is sex.
The 916 has got it all.
What makes the Ducati exceptional is the fact that it looks amazing and it was this beautiful looking package, but it also was phenomenally successful on the racetrack.
The Ducati 916 started its life as a production sports bike, but became a race icon when it won 3 consecutive World Championship titles.
It's basically a racer on the road, but it's much more than that. What Ducati did was introduce seriously beautiful design to a high-performance motorcycle like no one had ever done before them. They really thought about the aesthetics of the thing.
It was a completely fresh styling job. They moved the exhaust under the seat. They put this fairing on with these really distinctive headlights in. It was just this wonderful package that was really slim and everything fitted together beautifully.
In making it dense, small, and simple, they achieved a kind of beauty that can't be achieved in any other way. It's evolutionary.
But it was the engine that made it a world champion motorcycle.
When it came out, all the Japanese factories were racing around on 4-cylinder machines, but the Ducati brought things back. It came out with a V-twin engine, which might not have had quite as much power as the inline fours, but it was the way it produced the power.
A 4-cylinder engine delivers high power at high revs, which is great for straightaway speed. But anyone who's been to a racetrack know that races are won accelerating out of corners. And this is where Ducati's V-twin excelled.
How to make it accelerate when you're on the side of the motorcycle is something that's very, very difficult to do.
When the motorcycle is leaned over in a turn, its two little footprints of its rather small tires don't have a lot of grip. In order to begin accelerating early in the turn, the engine has to develop smooth and very controllable power right from the beginning. It can't come in with a sudden rush because it will simply break loose the tire. The machine will either slide out or actually fall over.
If you don't have that power pulse, you're not going to be able to do all them things you want to do. So you're going to wait, 5 meters in each corner, which means you're going to get 15th instead of first.
Ducati's 90-degree V-twin engine was developed for the specific task of accelerating smoothly off of corners.
You get a lot more traction. You can feel the rear tire a lot more closely so that you can accelerate much harder because you really can feel what's going on at the back of the bike.
Ducati's ability to deliver power in that way won world championships.
A big wheelie imminent to take the checker flag. It is Carl Fogarty then. He's the man in charge of the World Superbikes 1995.
The 916 dominated World Superbike like no bike has done, winning a record 13 of the 17 constructors' titles it competed in, and sales of the road version thrust Ducati from a small-time company into a world heavyweight sports bike manufacturer.
The 916 is one of the great bikes because it redefined sports bike design in the 1990s. Not only did it look great, it also performed really well, and it reintroduced the V-twin as a serious, high-performance engine configuration.
It epitomizes Italian styling excellence, engineering excellence, and competition success in a single machine.
It's this perfect combination of sound, racing success, and fantastic riding experience. Oh, and it looks brilliant too.
For its space-age design and incredible power delivery, the Ducati 916 is the second greatest ever motorcycle. What a machine! We've counted down 9 incredible bikes in our top 10 search to find the greatest ever motorcycle. But which one gets first place? We're about to find out. In search of the greatest ever motorcycle, we've gone through 9 incredible bikes that combine performance with romance, styling with sex. Great bikes, but none as revolutionary as our #1 machine. It's been in production for almost 50 years and has put whole nations on the road. The greatest motorcycle ever is the Honda Cub.
The Honda Cub is the bike that made Honda.
It was just a motorcycle that took over America.
Honda Cub has to be #1 because it's the biggest selling bike of all time. You can't argue with that.
With more than 40 million Cubs built, that's more than the entire population of Canada.
What Soichiro Honda wanted to do when he designed the Cub was to have an incredibly simple machine that would have huge mass appeal.
The engine in the Honda Cub is not more complicated than the engine in a lawnmower.
Although it's got just 4 brake horsepower, it can pull 50 miles an hour with its 1-cylinder air-cooled engine and 3-speed automatic gearbox. You don't get much simpler than that.
It's sort of what got motorcycle people started, because you could go down and buy it and it ran forever.
It was a get-on-and-go vehicle. And this was the key to Honda's tremendous success marketing his products in the United States.
In the 50s, motorcycling had such a bad reputation. If you were a biker, you were either a rocker or a Hell's Angel. In order to sell the Cub, Honda had to appeal to a new type of rider: ordinary people.
Anybody could ride one. Your parents wouldn't get mad at you. In fact, your parents wanted to ride that motorcycle when they saw it.
The world was hooked, and it wasn't long before the Cub went global.
This is the amazing new Honda Super Cub with a unique four-stroke engine to zip you up hills, give you up to 221 miles per gallon, and speeds up to 40 miles per hour.
Everyone's ridden one. It's like a universal experience. Everyone's ridden a Honda Cub. You know, everyone from Bangkok to Birmingham.
The Cub was built to be abused. This isn't the kind of machine that you're meant to lavish love and care on. These things are designed to be driven into the ground.
It doesn't matter what the Cub faces, it seems to keep running. So the greatest ever is going to put it to the test. And who better to help us than Charlie Borman, who with actor Ewan McGregor pushed his bike to oblivion around the world.
Okay, today we're going to try and destroy a Cub 90. And I've been told that you can drain the oil and put any old oil in it.
Okay. Can I take a tub of some old cooking oil?
Stupidly, what I've done is I've left the nut inside here. So now I'm going to have to fiddle around for the nut. I'm going to put this tip oil in there. It's pretty rank stuff. It's almost a Formula One oil change, that. I would say, you know, you shouldn't try this at home, okay? There's no smoke out the back, so it should be okay. We'll just have a quick drive around the block and see what happens. Okay. The chip oil seems to be fine. We've been driving around a little bit on it, and you can still bounce off corners. I could almost say that it was running better on this oil.
So the Cub handles just as well on chip fat as engine oil. On to stage 2.
Hiya, can I take 80 pizzas, please?
The Cub weighs just over 50 kilograms, so Charlie's next challenge is to overload it until it carries 4 times that.
There's not enough weight with the pizzas, so we're going to, I want to buy some more fruit and get as much on as possible.
Pizza is sweet.
Look, that's the old sort of... Oh, it's top heavy.
All this fruit and pizzas weigh 200 kilograms, the equivalent of a small family. Well, not as conclusive as we'd hoped, so time to try something more drastic.
You can shoot one and it'll keep on running. You can crash them, the handlebars will bend and all that kind of stuff, the bodywork will bend, but it'll still keep running.
They were bulletproof. I mean, as far as the motors and stuff went, they were pretty good.
Well, we've tried taking the oil out and filling it up with this horrible greasy fat from that pizza place. We've tried loading it up so that it can barely move with too much weight, and it still goes. So now we're going to chuck it off a building and see if it goes after that.
The bike is going to fall 22 meters to the ground. Surely that should kill it.
Here we go! That looks all right, actually. The wheels are dented, but it looks all right.
The bike was traveling at 54 miles an hour when it hit the ground. There's surely no way it can still work.
See if we can get it moving. Oh, I think it's buggered, really.
Anyway, we'll see. Let's get it started. See if we can start it. And we'll see what happens there. Okay. Ooh. You see the indicator?
It's working. Let's get it in gear.
Well, it's still going-ish. At least it went forward, and so effectively the bike has won, and they are indestructible. It's testimony to the bike.
If you're seeking to destroy a Honda Cub, if you have sufficient amounts of C4 explosives, you'll probably be successful. Other than that, you got no chance of knocking one down. They'll just keep coming. It's like Dirty Harry.
The Honda Cub helped build an automotive empire, still going strong after 47 years. It's cheap, simple, exciting to ride, and definitely indestructible. It is the greatest ever motorcycle.